We're going to start with introduction, so that's me, and we'll continue this way.
Richard Bangs.
Great, and do we need any introductions, like maybe where you live, or
Napa.
with anybody? Great,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Welcome.
Courtney Banks. Affiliated with him. No, I live in Napa.
Cool.
Educator.
Great.
Dana Banks. I work for Hampton Lumber and am a private timberland owner.
Misty Oger Swenson. Mr. Rasmussen. I work for Hampton.
Jen Arnold, I am the environmental stewardship coordinator for Hampton.
Jake Vale, I live here in Napa, and I'm a forester for Hampton as well.
Dan Bartlett, I'm a logger.
Kim Baird. I live in Brownsmead and I work for Vincent Brothers.
Kelly Huckestein, I'm on the Citizen Advisory Committee, and I'm right between Swenson and Napa on Coppish Road. I never know which one to say.
Cheryl Johnson, I'm in Brownsmead, and I'm on the CAC, and then I'm our group liaison to the countywide CAC.
And my neighbor.
Oh, Brownsmead Club. Yep.
I'm Dirk. I'm on the Citizen Advisory Committee from Brownsmead.
Vicki Barrett, Napa, retired.
Gail Hendrickson, Clatsop County Planning.
Victoria Sage, Clatsop County Planner.
Excellent timing.
Next up is the review of the October meeting. And I was actually not here for the last meeting, so does anybody want to say anything about it? Cool. I read it. It sounded like an interesting meeting. All right. Report from Cheryl about the countywide meeting.
The countywide didn't have one in October. Instead, there was an in-service on Forest Practices Act. And so that was a 3-hour one. There were 3 people from our group that came. Dirk was there for the majority of it. Telly, I think, was there for a chunk of it. So Telly's gone tonight, and me. So there were 3 from the
I was
north.
there too, but I think Dirk and I snuck out around the same
Oh,
time.
then we had 4 of our 5 were there, which is excellent. There 3 of our county commissioners were there. Thompson attended, Webb attended, and our county commissioner Kathleen Sullivan attended. And I have some feedback on it. Gail, have you gotten some feedback?
I have actually gotten quite a bit.
Okay.
And I can probably guess what it is. We should have spent more time focusing on Forest Practices Act. Didn't need all the history. The taxation part should have been much shorter. Those were the 3 big ones I got.
Those were also all of mine, and I know that he repeatedly said, "I can be here all night," which I think he was trying to be, useful with his time and kind and generous to us. But I know for a fact, as I looked around that room, there are people there who had made arrangements for childcare, and as we all know, you don't blow off your childcare and say, "I'll be there an hour or 2 later than I told you I would." And there were, because it started, late in the afternoon, there are people there who had made arrangements to get off of work. And I think when you're presenting to the public, it's respectful to start on time and end on time, and then to cover your topics.
And for the committee members who either didn't go or did go, did you get one of the green folders? Did you get one, Dirk?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't get one.
I would like to add that I think your assistant county manager, Monica Steele, would probably be more useful in terms of providing economic tax data for people. Basically the short version is how much money does the timber industry, for example, generate, just in terms of tax revenue, and how is that dispersed through taxing districts? And then if you want to get really fancy, well, what are the taxing districts using that money for? And basically it's practical information. I don't think the guy from the Oregon Department of Revenue, anyway, it was pretty painful.
It was.
I'm glad I missed that one.
Yeah, no,
The last hour was good.
I can
We
either
finally
stab
got
myself
into
in
the
the leg with my pencil, or I can leave, so I'm out.
Good move.
Cool, good feedback. So next then is the Goal 4 overview from the staff.
Okay. Before I talk about Goal 4, I just want to kind of give an introduction to everyone about why are we here today. I know a lot of you, this is probably the first time that you've been to the Northeast Committee meeting, and so what we're doing as the county is we have a comprehensive plan, which encompasses 5 volumes, 18 goals that looks at land and water and transportation and energy and open space and forest lands and farmlands, citizen involvement, beaches, dunes, the whole 9 yards. Pretty much anything you've got in the county, we're looking at it. So the county adopted this plan about 40 years ago, back in 1979, so it's actually having a birthday, and it needs to be updated. You know, the plan was adopted before we had internet, before there were personal computers, before anybody had a cell phone. It's really outdated, and it just needs to be completely opened up and re-examined. So the comp plan is not a document like you think of a zoning code. It's very warm and fuzzy. It's very general. It's just sort of, these are the things, if we had the best of all possible worlds, that we'd like to see happen in the county. So I just want to stress that what we're talking about tonight are not zoning codes or regulations or rules or ordinances. It's the warm, fuzzy goals that we want to accomplish over the next 20 years. So just to put everybody's mind at ease that we're not making...
And are those warm and fuzzy, goals going to be going to the Oregon Board of Forestry or as a representation of Clatsop County and what we want? Or is it just for us here in Clatsop County to be able to look at and say, oh, that's so pretty, and move on? I mean, what is the functional purpose of this document that is being created?
Okay, so the functional purpose is, I like to explain it as a pyramid. So at the bottom, you've got the comprehensive plan, which is very broad, very general. It'll say things like, we need to preserve our forest lands, or we would like to work with the Department of Forestry to help refine the Forest Practices Act. And I'm making things up, so just general, warm, kind of fuzzy things. You move up this, and then that gets adopted by the Board of Commissioners, and it guides everything else we do in terms of land use and zoning and development in the county, and it is just a countywide document. So then you move up the pyramid, and it gets a little bit narrower and a little more focused, and that's your zoning ordinance. And that's where you start getting rules in that'll say, if your land is zoned F80 forestry, you have to have a minimum lot size of 80 acres. If you're going to build a house, here's very specific criteria you have to meet. And a lot of those zoning regulations are already set by state statute. So there's not much wiggle room in how we as a county can really change them. That's pretty much preordained. You move up the ladder from there, and then, say somebody comes in and does want to build a house, then they get even more specific and more detail-oriented, and they go for their own particular permit to build a house, and it's a conditional use permit. So there's a public notice, and they have to meet certain criteria, and they have to, meet the land use code. And then from there, you move up to the very pinnacle where it's very focused for your building permit, and it's focused specifically on one house and maybe 10 screws and a rafter. And so it's this level of specificity as you move up the pyramid. And I don't know if that answers your question.
Well,
Can I have a run at it?
Yes, please.
And my opinion is how it would be, the county is an extension of state government. The goals are from the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then the county is theoretically an extension of the state in terms of government, but the state will give the county goals and say, here are the goals, you need to write a comprehensive plan that addresses each goal in specifics, and then the county is basically doing that. So zoning is basically what most people think about when you think about a comprehensive plan.
Right, fire
And
forestry.
I don't think there's as much latitude at the county level as people think, because usually it's falls back on the state law, and then if you want to do something with your property, and if you have a problem with it, and you think the county is out of line, then you would appeal it to
The state.
the state, to the
Right.
Land Use Board of Appeals. So
I guess
I don't think any damage is going to happen is a short version here, and it's
So is
mostly.
the state the one who came up with these questions?
So is this an agenda that was provided
This is
by
Okay.
the
No.
Were
state
these
level?
questions, who
No.
came up with these questions?
No, these are questions that were generated by staff, not to sway anybody one way or the other, but just to give people things to talk about. They're things that we heard mainly when we did the Goal 3-4 workshop back in September.
I was there.
Yeah, and so a lot of these questions came up in the discussion. And so since they came up in the discussion at a public workshop, we thought that we would put the same questions out to all the different committees. There's 6 committees in the county working on this. So all the committees are getting the same questions. So you can answer the questions, you could ignore the questions, you can have your discussion however you want. We put them out as a starting point so that whoever's chairing the meeting didn't have to say, what do we want to talk about Goal 4? So, but you can ignore them. I don't.
Well, I guess I read our old comprehensive plan for farm and forestry, and very little information these topics are. I guess I'm curious. Why are because I looked at when it was last edited, and I think it was 2015. Am I incorrect on that?
In 2015, they took the goals that are in here and pulled them out and just made them sort of a separate document. They didn't change the goals.
Okay.
So these are still things from 1979.
It says it
And there was
amended in 83.
There was an amendment in 83 where they, after they adopted, the state came through and basically said, okay, now that we've set up the process, we see what you gave us, here's how we want you to fix it. But for the most part, these policies and the language in this comp plan haven't been touched since 79, 83.
And has the state requested us to touch it then, and to ask us to
So the state
take
has
care of it?
all these goals, the 19 goals, and then they say, so they like have a very basic outline of like these are what the goals should look like, and then the counties take that outline and give it their bent, their twist, their local impact. And then that whole giant stack of goals is what informs when they're making land use policy
And I
or
think
when they're doing that.
I'm just
I
curious.
think the
about
county
who-
commission probably, I don't know, the
Asked?
request to the state was probably, either the county commission decided that it was time for a review as we're doing, or maybe the state asked.
No,
I don't know.
yeah, there used to be a mandatory review that the state required called periodic review. They did away with that in the early 2000s. So this is a voluntary process that the county is undertaking. Some of the questions that might be on here, I know that climate change and the whole carbon issue is something, obviously that's very controversial, but it wasn't something that was even on anybody's radar in 1979. And it may be that as we go through this process, it's not something that we want to address. It may be something we want to address. I don't know how people want to address it, if they want to address it. And so that's not my job. My job's not to tell you what you're going to think.
Right.
That's why we send out notices and we tell people to come here. And we don't tell people to come here. We would like for people to come here. If we could tell people to come here, then we get a lot of public input. But so it's a starting point for a conversation. And staff doesn't, I'm going to use the term, have a dog in this fight. We are here to listen to what you want,
Right.
to put all those ideas together, and then to take it to the Board of Commissioners. And they ultimately are the ones who will say yay or nay.
I was just curious what started this whole process and the why and the how and who was mandating it or not mandating it. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. And it makes a little bit more sense to me, but it does still feel like a zoning situation because we can't do anything outside of state law. And the rainbows and butterflies, I mean, it just feels like, I would love a perfect world also, and I mean, it would be neat to be able to put that on paper. But I just was curious about where they were going to be going with it. And I mean, is it just a lost document that is tossed out to the state and said, hey, this is what some of us think over here? Or is it an actual document that is going to be focused on and used and referred to, because if it's focused on, used, and referred to, especially for the Oregon Department of Forestry or for the Oregon Board of Forestry, I feel like that there should be a representation of foresters, environmental biologists, research studies, that it's not a feelings-based document, that it is science-based and based on somebody who has, based on thought processes of people who work in the industry. And that I'm really curious about why are we changing, because we live right down the street from a working forest. I have no complaints. I haven't heard a single person around here complain. And so I'm very curious to see why are we fixing something that isn't broken.
And we might not be fixing it as part of the thing, you know, because like
This is a review.
yeah,
Right.
and we might be saying like it's fine. That's all. That's an option too. So
That would be
So
awesome.
let's work through the agenda and then
Yeah.
let's,
Let's see where we end up.
What's the time frame on crunching this out?
3 years.
We have as long as it's very open. We can address as much or as little as we want to at each meeting.
Yeah, that's what I just wondered.
We
I mean,
try to
you
be
get in-
here about an hour and a half.
I mean, you get
I've
in-
got dinner to get home to.
yeah, you can spend a lot of time on this, but if you got a limit or a time
It's
frame.
3.5 years.
Right.
From this year, from 2019.
From
This
July
is
of
like
this
our
year, yeah.
fourth
No, I
meeting.
mean, yeah, that's no joke. 3.5 years.
Yeah, and then what happens after that is when this gets adopted, and we do refer to this every day, when we do staff reports, there's always citations from the comp plan to back up what we're
Right.
recommending. So once this gets done, then we move up the pyramid to the zoning codes, and that's probably another 2 to 3 year process to amend all the zoning codes.
Sorry.
So this is, believe me, it's funny. If you don't laugh, you would cry about this.
So in other words, you're saying there's a reason why it wasn't updated.
So you're giving birth and then having a small child, and
It
you
was
know,
written,
Yeah.
it was probably written in 62.
So,
And there are 19 goals, and we're kind of sort of trying to do one each month, but we don't get all the way through one each month, so.
Well, we're
not
gonna
doing 3 years on
revise
forestry.
them. Yeah.
did that get to all your questions and concerns?
No.
it's clear as mud. Clear as mud.
Well, if you have questions,
Oh, I'll
Tori
ask.
and I didn't bring
I'm a
a card
good hand
with me,
raiser
but
traditionalist, so I'll ask.
I do have a question, just hopefully it's a quick one. Well, this, you said we're 3.5 years, but we're going to move altering. This isn't going to be the only time dedicated for the forestry goal. There's going to be lots of other meetings of this sort on this goal.
yeah. So what'll happen is, depending on how the discussion goes, they may continue it to December, and then when they finish the discussion part of it, and all the other groups finish their discussion parts of it, then we as staff will take everything that we've heard, put it into a draft with the policies for goal 4 or 3 or 2 or 1 or whatever, and then bring it back to all 6 committees again for them to wordsmith it and look at it and say, yes, you've captured our concerns, or you didn't get this quite right, or we thought of something else we want to add, or now we want to take this out. So, and then it goes through that process. And then in between there will be open houses. So we kicked off with open houses back in June. Come the springtime when we've got some rewrites going on, then there will be another public open house in addition to the meetings where you can come and just sit and talk about that. Then once the rewrites are through the committees, then it goes to the Planning Commission for a public meeting. Then it goes to the Board of Commissioners for 2 public readings. So,
Quick question, out of these 19 goals from the state, are they all under forestry, or is there a big
just
umbrella?
this one.
no, it's big. So goal 1 deals with citizen involvement. Goal 2 is just general land use planning. Goal 3 was farmlands. We're on goal 4 now, which is forest lands. And then, for example, goal 7 is natural hazards. Goal 8 is recreational lands. Goal 10 is housing. Goal 11 is transportation. Goals 16 and 17 deal with estuary lands. Goal 18 deals with beaches. Same with goal 19. We do not have a goal 15. There are 19 goals. We don't have a 15 because that deals only with Willamette Valley. So, and we don't care about that.
This is a real short. So I'm just sad to say, because agriculture is kind of my bread and butter, and I'm sad that I missed goal 3, and I don't know how I missed goal 3, but it's just, I guess I'm not tapped into the county like I need to be, and obviously since the newspaper only comes out like twice a week now.
Newspaper didn't cover
If
it.
you signed in, you'll get updates.
Okay, because it's just, I
And
don't
we're
know
on
if we're
Facebook.
throwing flags up or flares for people to see and invite, but I missed my invitation to agriculture. I'm real sorry.
So on the county's website, first of all, we are on Facebook, and the whole process is on
I need to
Facebook.
add you on Facebook.
Also on the county's website, every single agenda from day one, the open
I
house
found
flyers.
it, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so
found
you can go back and see goal 3 and what was in there. All our contact information is up on the website, so please always call, email, just get in contact with us. And we're happy to add you to a list if you have friends who want to be on a list. If you have enemies you want to put on the list, please let us know. Because if you send us an email or a mailing address, we will send them a notice. So.
I think that was my other question is, I think a lot of people were surprised this was happening. So if you're not already tapped into the county, are you planning to do any outreach? For example, if you're talking about forest land, are you doing outreach to forest land owners?
We have contacted I'd say the bigger companies. So we've got Greenwood, we've got Hampton. I'm trying to think
Who
who
was
else
from
we've got.
Hampton, did you hear of it?
I don't.
Nobody from Hampton knew about this.
Well, there should be because they got a stakeholder letter in the mail, and that was our first outreach to them.
I
And
wonder where.
Portland has it.
So, we're trying to reach out as we find contact info for people. It may not be the most perfect contact info because, I'm very new to the community. I'm not tapped into who's who.
We can help you.
Yes, but I need you to come here first because I don't know where to find you. So now that we've found each other, please help us. So.
And Gail,
Yeah.
can I answer a question too? So the question was, is this the only time we're going to deal with forestry? And I don't know if this part got covered, but there are 5 regional CACs in Clatsop County, so we are one of those. And then each of those 5 send a rep to the county-wide one, and then there are some additional people. So I think it's awesome that so much Hampton folks are here tonight. So I wanted to tell the Hampton folks. So our CAC is dealing with forestry tonight, and we'll probably roll over to the next one. But I can tell you that the county-wide one we're in November now. In October, we had hoped to get through agriculture, and we didn't get all the way through it. So in our meeting, which Gail will tell us the exact date and time in just a moment. So the county-wide one is in 2 weeks, and we will finish agriculture and probably start forestry, which means that we won't finish forestry. So then that would roll us over to December, but I think at the very end, Gail's going to tell us that we're getting December off. But at the countywide, and so that's one person from each of the regional ones, and then some people from the cities, because we're all outside of urban growth boundaries folks. So the
They encourage
countywide
people
one,
to go to the county ones
yeah.
as
So
well.
if the Hampton folks wanted to show up at that one also.
Yeah.
So the countywide meeting is November 21st at 4 p.m. And it's at the Boynton Building, which is 857 Commercial in Astoria.
And the first half will definitely be agriculture, and I'm not the boss. I don't know if we'll get through agriculture and get into forestry or not, but
What time is that one?
4 p.m.
All right, I have a question from reading the background report that you guys provided. That it talks about the Clatsop Vision 2030 Together plan, and I was just wondering what the relationship between that and the comprehensive plan is, or if there's any. or what the purpose of that document was?
The class of 23, and I wasn't here when that document was
Okay.
put together, but I think it was sort of a visioning plan to help the Board of Commissioners move forward with projects that they wanted to see happen.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't meant to replace the comprehensive plan or even attempt to address it,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
just to kind of establish that vision for the board.
Okay, great.
It's kind of a happy, who are we and where are we going?
Yeah, like a nonprofit would do like a,
Yeah.
okay.
And you do have a copy of that in one of your later tabs, like 28, 29,
Oh, great.
somewhere in there. You've got it.
Oh, yeah, the vision, right.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So let's just address some of these, the discussion
Can I start
questions.
really
Yeah,
quick?
please.
With kind of something that I like was trying to say about goal 3 that I don't feel like I was communicating well. But when we got to goal 4, I just appreciate how it's laid out and that there are like bullet points with like policies. And I feel like that is what I meant when I said like the agricultural one didn't have something like that. And I appreciated the format, and I would like to like see that format used in the agricultural goal of like, instead of just like a background of like, this is farming as it is, the end, have more like these policies, like this is what we value, this is what we want to happen. I would really appreciate that to go for the goal 3 that we talked about last time, because it was a little more nebulous and there wasn't some like direct verbiage of like, this is what we want. And I really appreciated that this one. It seemed a lot more clear. So.
And on that note, I also appreciated the policies, and I spent a lot of time with this. I have all my little tabs in here. I've been working on this sort of off and on for 2 weeks, and I have comments in here. I spent a lot of time with this one. This one is really important to me. Our property is ag forest, and we're tiny. We have 12.8 acres. But my back property line is State Department of Forestry. So I am surrounded by forestry, and we have done logging on our land and replanting on our land. So the forestry one is sort of something near and dear to my heart. So I have all my little tabs here. And I did like the policies, and I have a couple of questions, and I don't want to hog up the time. A lot of the suggested questions deal with deal with climate change and those things, and I feel like climate change is a bit more abstract and a wee bit more down the line, and I would like to suggest that we maybe clump those climate change ones in, and I would like to suggest that we do those maybe toward the end of the discussion. Of the questions in the agenda here, if you just number them in order, I would sort of like to suggest that we look at maybe number 4, which is how can the economic, environmental, and recreational aspects of forest lands be balanced? And then number 6 is how can the county prepare enforceable policies that can in turn be implemented through zoning and developmental standards, which I think is a question we're eternally asking. Rather than just writing down our feelings, how do we actually get them into a space where they can do something? So I would like to suggest that we maybe focus on those to start with.
That sounds good.
And I do have specific comments on the policies because it was so nice of you to So I have comments on policy 1, policy 3, and policy 10. And so we can sort of proceed.
You're in a row, just keep going.
However you would like.
Yeah, what are your comments on policies 1, 3, and 10?
Okay. And I also need to let you know, I need to leave at 6 promptly. The granddaughters are coming in by somewhere else. So if I get up and walk out at 6, it's not because I didn't like whatever was being said, or because I don't care anymore. So I put 6. Okay, now let's see if hopefully I didn't. And possibly the easiest way to follow along, this one is in the back of all of ours.
Should we start off by just reading the policy you're talking about?
Yeah. And in our fat booklets, there are things in there, so in our chat book, it's countywide element goal for forest lands. And then those pages are numbered. And so I have some things highlighted. Okay, so my first one is a general one. So in this little honker, at the bottom of page number 1, and so remembering that this was written back in the 80s and has not been updated since then, concern is increasing over the effects of traditional forest management practices such as herbicide spraying, road building, and harvesting on watersheds, recreational areas, fish and wildlife habitat, and nearby residences. Forest owners are also concerned that these items and the controversy surrounding them. The Oregon Forest Practices Act protects these forest resources, and many feel that the Act adequately controls the adverse impacts associated with commercial forestry. Other county residents believe the Act is too weak and advocate greater controls over forest practices. I wanted to say that I think that's a great summary, and I hope it gets left in when the rewrite happens. I thought it was a very nice balance, saying that there are two sides to this issue. There are issues, there are controversies, and then, unfortunately, the rest of it doesn't do anything about it. It doesn't address them. But that one is like a good starting. Policy number 1. Forest lands shall be conserved for forest uses, including production of trees and the processing of forest products, open space, buffers from noise, visual separation from conflicting uses, watershed protection, wildlife, fisheries habitat, soil protection from wind and water, maintenance of clean air and water, outdoor recreational activities compatible with these uses, and grazing for livestock. First thing I wanted to say is that I was very glad to see this one written in the county one, because the state one is just to conserve forestry land for economic development, period. Whereas this one talks about all of the uses of the forest. So watershed protection, fisheries habitat, maintenance of clean air and clean water. It puts them all in there. So that's one of the policies that our county wrote, which I think is great.
Statewide has it as well, though, doesn't it? Sound management of soil, air, water, and fish and wildlife resources.
Yeah, it says conserve soil, water, air quality, fish and wildlife resources, agriculture, and recreational opportunities appropriate in a forest environment.
Yeah.
But it's condensed for sure.
Yeah. But you're right, they are. They don't mention it, but, see if I can, okay. Sorry, I have to go back to my notes to I did this over a long period of time, so I have to remember where I am. Good. So the one that I think that I and a lot of other citizens are concerned about right now is very much watershed protection. And so the maintenance of clean water and how that dovetails into forestry. And I think one of the things that we learned in the workshop is that Forest Practices Act is the beginning and the end. And it's very interesting that the Forest Practices Act says that no unit of local government shall adopt any rules, regulations, or ordinances, or take any other actions that prohibit, limit, regulate, subject to approval, or in any other way affect Forest Practices Act on forest lands. So if there is concern, and there's a lot of concern right now about watersheds, and particularly Rockaway Beach, I'm sure you know, their watershed is not state forestry. It's two different private forestries, and you probably know more about it than I do. But the northern part of the watershed is one industrial forestry, and then the southern part is another one. So those people were dealing with two different, industrial forests, and they had a great deal of difficulty for clear cutting and herbicides and destruction of their watersheds. So I think the question is, how do we keep safe water for citizens if they're impacted by forestry uses? So I don't have an answer for that. We're just putting it out there.
Since you brought up the subject, I was curious, do you know of or whether or not that watershed was tested prior to the forestry activities to find out whether or not it was the forest activities themselves that caused the watershed issues, or if those watershed issues were already there? I mean, I'm just curious because my education is science-based, and so I'm very scientific when I look at topics, and I was curious to see what the water testing or what the watershed looked like prior to the forestry activities, if there's any documentation or any research. I mean, I totally agree, watersheds are valuable. As a person that supports many industry members, that being a steward of the land is extremely important. And so I really hesitate unless I've seen documentation that says that this watershed was pristine, and then look what they did.
Yes, and I don't know the details on it. I'm not the expert on that one, so
Okay.
yeah, I can't answer the questions on that one. Yeah.
That's usually misinformation, even with agriculture.
All right. And then the policies, so the number 3, forest practices on lands designated conservation forest shall conform to the Forest Practices Act and the Forest Practices Rules revised. So again, that how do we work with forest practices if there are things in the comp plan, if we want any kind of additional support for watersheds, and whether they're municipal watersheds or individual family drinking sources. So when we first had our property, we took our water off of our property. So we're now with Napa water, but I have great empathy for. There are lots of people in rural Placer County who do take their water off of their land, and my next door neighbors took their water off of their land also until quite recently. So both municipals, as in Rockaway, and individuals. Okay, so for this number 3, and we're trying to figure out how to write these and what to say so that they're not just feelings. So we're stumbling our way through this and making it up as we go. The only thing that occurred to me is that, so in policies where it says forest practices shall conform to the Oregon Forest Practices Act, and maybe we put in there as a minimum, rather than that's the standard, the only standard. And I'm not a lawyer, I don't write land use, I don't know if that gets us anywhere. I'm just throwing things out.
I think the forest practices is the forest practices. You follow the forest practices. It's not,
You don't have a
you
choice.
don't have a minimum, you follow that's your policy.
But,
Right,
but in other circumstances, I mean, I could cite a few where industry members have gone above and beyond in order
Exactly.
to protect. So
Yes.
there's where
Yeah.
it's at an extreme cost to the company themselves that they will go above and beyond to make sure. So yeah, the forest practice it's a minimum, but in order to be a good steward, sometimes you look at something and you're like, well, hey, 50 feet's probably not enough in this situation.
Right.
Let's, but it's up to not personal, but it's up to that forester's I guess,
Collisions?
well, not just that, because a lot of it can be political too. I mean, and if you look at a sensitive situation, you try to do the best you can in a sensitive situation. And so I really feel, most industry members, I couldn't never say all, but I would say most industry members do go above and beyond in situations where they're like, hey, this is sensitive, let's do better.
I have a different take on kind of the general, in terms of relating back to zoning, and the conversational points that were brought out. Basically, there's a lot of non-conforming laws throughout the county where houses are in the forest interface zone. And in relation to climate change, that's the issue in California is there's a bazillion more people living in the interface zone that used to not live there. So if that's an issue, then somehow those non-conforming lots need to be addressed in a way that doesn't create a contradiction with forest practices. So.
What's great about forest practices is it does have inclusions in there for, I'm assuming you're talking California because you're talking about the threat of wildfire.
If Clatsop County, for instance, there's a lot of people who are rodeoed into forest areas. And,
well, some of those lots have been sold hundreds of years ago.
Is it
so the point is,
to shoot some
so now you have the tail wagging the dog where, that in terms of zoning, I would see a solution as somehow figuring out that the residential development maybe shouldn't occur in an interface zone or close to forest lands in a way that would create a conflict where now that you have an incursion into forest lands, well then you want to change forest lands practices to accommodate your incursion into it.
Isn't there an ORS law that is supposed to protect forestry and farmland from that?
There are lots of laws that protect
That protect forestry and farmland from that. Okay, so because I thought before you could build, you had to make sure that your residence wasn't going to impede forest practices or farming practices nearby.
You do practically if you look at, everybody wants a house on the beach.
Right.
And so to me, that's a huge problem and creating a lot of conflict.
I have a question. Is there anything that requires realtors who are selling property to people next to a working forest to disclose that is a working forest so that people understand?
If they're in the sales business,
Yeah,
you
probably
need to talk to the county. I
be-
think the county has a lot on the books that would, if you were savvy, that happens all the time. People buy the property and it's not permitted to do what you would like it to do.
And then
Being upset and
when we bought our house 2 years ago, Napa was becoming too urban for us. We could hear all of these new neighbors coming in. We wanted outs. We went out to Brownsmead and we bought, 2.5 acres? And our neighbor is state forestry and night guard logging. And one person, and his property meets us in the middle of the county road. But when we bought that property, there was something that said in our paperwork that we have forest timber and there is forest timber around us. So there is something within the paperwork, but it did not come from the realtor.
and you had to read it.
You're right. And know what
Yeah.
it's talking about.
I'm the one that delves into everything.
I don't think the county is letting anything happen like that anymore, but there's a legacy of that problem.
But that issue comes up all the time, and it came up in the agricultural discussion also, exactly. And at the countywide one of the issues that came up was a guy who said, I live right next to a dairy, and it smells terrible, and blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
you should have known that when you bought the place.
He must have missed the cows on the drive in.
But your understanding is right.
The EFU protects.
Yeah, Oregon has fabulous land use laws, and they are to protect forest land and farmland. And that's the whole purpose. And that interface theoretically is not supposed to happen. And when it does, I think a lot of these, and again, Gail will correct me if I'm incorrect because I'm not a land use person, but a lot of the things that are written here are so that residents who move up here from whatever, from California, can't say, I don't like how the dairy smell, or my back property is state forest, they are responsible for the fire, I pay my fire tax, I don't complain, they are my neighbors, it's, yeah.
Well, it makes you wonder if there's something the county can be doing to help facilitate that information sharing with people moving in the area or self-transfer.
Well, once you go to the planning department, then it's process really kicks off.
Well,
People
So-
call all the time.
and with new houses that go into these areas, not on the farmland or forest land themselves, but we do make people record a deed restriction that basically goes into your title work that says you are acknowledging that your house is next to a farm or a forest, and you're not going to take any action to hinder them or increase their cost or prevent them from operating.
So when I mean, and not to be naughty or anything, but when you dive into this even further, when you address the herbicides that foresters use, and you address the the situations that happen near or close to watersheds, these residents weren't there when this land was forestry to start with, and so I guess, I mean, where do you, as a county commission or a county planning committee, draw the line and say, well, guys, you built your house next to a working operation. They're following state law. They've asked to communicate with you more often than not, unless it's a renter. They can't discuss information. If it's a renter, they have to discuss it with the landowner. But where do you as a county in this defend, I guess, the industry person, either the farmer or the forester?
We actually tend not to get involved in that because
Well, it's good choice. Don't lay down on the bomb.
Zoning is supposed to protect your rights as an individual and
Right.
also your rights as a community. So
Right.
if you live here and it's nice, and then the zoning is supposed to protect the value of your property or your community. So if
Right.
somebody wants to build a landfill adjacent to you, and the zoning would prohibit that, which also protects the value of your property. Even though, so you can't have, hey, it's my property, I can have a landfill
Right.
attitude, and sometimes, obviously, that creates conflicts, but I think
Especially
our
when their
pyramid,
landfill was like old cars and buses and
yeah, and, the pyramid thing that Gail talked about, I think is constructive. All we can do is say we would like, and then that kind of starts the process, and in the future, maybe the
Okay.
state will say, well, they would like, so maybe perhaps herbicides, if that's affecting other people's
Right.
adversely, then that's not,
And somebody
Copacetic.
could potentially look at ODOT, right? No. I'm kidding.
yeah, the legislature makes laws,
Yeah.
changes, so that's really where, you'll see probably stuff like that as far as herbicide, I would imagine. But this is a public forum and appropriate place to comment on that.
Well, and I think that's part of that, discussion topic is balancing the economic, environmental, recreational aspects of the forest, and which is this goal, and it does get kind of nebulous.
I think the main thing that bothers me the most is we do have a lot of recreational land here. We do have working forest land here. The thing that bothers me the most as a homeowner out here in the middle of nowhere, Brownsmead, 3 houses from the end
Hey.
of the road. No, the squatters. The squatters. I had one come up to my house. So how do we, this is the only thing that bugs me the most, is how do we keep them out of our forests? And they're on drugs. When they're trying to tell your goat to get your head out of the fence, and then they come up to my door at 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm the only one home. Our forests, the guys that work in the forest are the best stewards of the forest because they spend every waking hour they're awake in those forests working. They see things that we never see as just community members.
Well, they take their life in their hands.
Well, I think
And they do
relative,
take their life in their hands.
forest practices, public safety is an intersection of,
Yeah.
in forest.
And I would think as
areas,
forest practices, public safety would need to be something that needs to be addressed in this community.
Well, maybe
Because we have a
landowner
huge problem
safety,
with it.
especially in your area. Landowner safety.
Mhm.
But protecting the larger landowners also, because, their land's
Yep.
becoming a dump.
Yep.
They drive in and
Yep.
drop tires, or they drive in and
drop their
That's the
garbage.
sort of thing I think that
Yeah.
helpful for the conversation.
Yeah.
But the county can say, hey, yeah, that's an issue that needs to be considered.
I want to come to those county meetings. Darn work.
There's, the internet, so there's lots of opportunity to provide input.
Oh yeah, no, I know the emails.
I think the recreation component of balance, I think, is something we take a great amount of pride in. Hampton manages about 30,000 acres right behind us here, and it's open and free access to the public most times of the year except during fire danger. And I know that's something that we hear a lot from the community as being very important and something that we're very proud of.
But then you get those like dumping or public
And
safety
you do
issues,
get those,
and that is a
yeah.
hard,
And you have to lock your gate.
And vandalism.
Right.
Vandalism, well, yeah,
And wanting it to be open for the people that enjoy it and respect it.
Recreation comes at a cost, so, I mean, none of the landowners are making money off of recreation. Recreation is just a good, open-hearted,
PR.
it's PR, it's an olive branch, and so they're not making money off of recreation.
well, they are with the tourism,
No, they're not.
yeah, they are.
It is, state
If they buy the
lands.
gas, they come in and buy foods in the stores.
Oh, so you're talking as a
Yes.
county
Yes.
situation,
Yes.
not
Oh,
the
yeah.
landowner of
Yes.
the,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they
As
do bring in,
recreation,
yeah.
yeah.
They do bring in funds into our county and gas and food and so on and so forth, but it's actually, if they weren't having successful harvests, I guess, fundraising opportunities, there would no be, recreation, because it is a cost.
So I'm assuming from the context of this meeting and the questions here, that section on balancing forest uses, that's directed at publicly owned land, unless there's some...
No,
Is there an intention to somehow
it's everything.
encourage through zoning regulations, increased, so, Hampton has an open recreation policy. Not all landowners have that.
Sure.
Is it the intention of the county that through some sort of zoning regulation that would be enforced change of those policies for other landowners, or? And I guess, what is this question asking?
So I think we weren't asking it to have anybody say, well, we want to implement some zoning regulations that says if you're going to have a forest practice, now you've got to provide 10 acres of open space open to the public all hours of the day, and you've got to make the trails open. It was just a discussion, and I think the reason it might have come up is how do we possibly combine where we have privately held land that does get opened up for recreation, but also could it be used as an evacuation route? That's another thing. I mean, so it's how do we make the most of what we've got and use it in multiple ways to meet multiple needs. So
If anything, it would open the door to allow permissible use if you wanted to have in forest lands that were privately owned. If you wanted to say, I would like to have the capacity to have a recreational event, then that is something that might require a permit, and then the county could help. They would have language where then you would be able to do that, or like you said, with the emergency corridor. Farmland, for instance, not a good example entirely, but if I want to put windmills up on the farm, and I'm not allowed to build a tower in an EFU zone, well then a fix would be, we need regulations so I could build a, tower in EFU land so I can have a windmill if I wanted to. So in a way, it's also looking at how to make things more manageable, again with farming, with multi-use farming where people want to have some kind of retail
Agritourism.
component,
So-
or agritourism, then
Pumpkin
let's have the plan reflect that and permit
As a
that,
value,
make it
yeah.
permittable where there's a pathway for a landowner to have that.
I see. So yeah, the vision would be
That's
something
my
like,
opinion.
yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying.
Or just saying that as a county, we recognize that as a valuable income stream for
Yeah.
farmers or foresters or whatever, and publicly stating that in the comprehensive plan so that it's, that's kind of how I envision it.
That's something we talked about as being, thinking about how can we get, as a landowner in the area, be more involved with the evacuation emergency planning that goes on in the county, like VPs, right? Where can we, work together on those things? Not just that, expand outside of forestry a little bit, but equipment. Like things that we have that road building or up the mill site. Does the county have an inventory of all the private sector equipment that's available?
Yes, they do. Actually, the county has it and the state has it, and it's called, every year, this month, they will send out the required suppliers for whenever there's like another slide, or if there's an earthquake, or whatever. Who are they gonna go to? What equipment do you have? What is your response time? And that is something that Vincent Brothers, we do countywide, and we do within a certain section of ODOT, within certain counties, because we will go into Washington County, or we'll go into a little bit of Columbia County.
It goes into the incident management
Yeah.
website for
Yeah.
the state, because you know how, even though
Emergency response.
yeah, even though
contractors is
fighting
what it
forest
is.
fires is the incident management team's main responsibility, they do respond to other in-state situations and out of state. So they send
to the
equipment.
forest landowners is what
Yeah.
kind of capacities can they add to that discussion as far as evacuations, gatekeepers, that kind of stuff.
So if I can go kind of high level here for a second, the things we talked about so far in regards to kind of the forest land goals, I understand you guys' hands are really tied in a lot of ways in what you can do as far as changes to policy. But it sounds to me like each of these topics, if there was in the visioning statement something like that, there will be an active collaboration with the forest landowners and these other interests, like you were talking about watershed protections. I know that's something that when folks have concerns, we always would like to be involved on the front end. If there's a property landowner down that has some sort of water concern related to our activities, like we want to know and we want to address that, see what can be done with the recreation. It's the same kind of thing, and the emergency planning. It really, I don't know if that's addressed in the current document, if part of the vision of how the county interacts with forest landowners is a collaborative relationship, but.
If I can hop in there. Policy number 10, forest activities within watersheds in areas designated conservation forest in the comprehensive plan will be conducted in accordance with the Oregon Forest Practices Act and the Oregon Forest Practices Rules. Again, I would love to see us at a minimum. And then the last sentence there, as written, additional protective measures negotiated between forest landowners and water users are encouraged. So additional protective measures are encouraged. And that's good wording. It should stay in there. And if there was a way to strengthen it or clarify it.
Or even have a separate policy that specifically encourages collaboration and working together. Is that kind of what you're getting at for larger, all of these things? There should be a more
Collaborative relationship
exactly.
between
That is a value.
the public and the
Right.
private sector.
And as with all things, I'm a retired teacher, and there are good teachers and there are bad teachers, and there are teachers that make mistakes, and so we need to have rules and regulations and policy. And because I was a good teacher and I didn't make mistakes, or I always did my best, it doesn't mean that we can't have rules and regulations. And personally, I have a great deal of respect for Hampton. I know that, is Beth Fitch a forester for you? Yes. Yeah. When I come out of Brownsmead, that corner there is the one that she replanted and did beautiful work. So I personally have a great deal of respect for Hampton, but not all foresters do business like Hampton does. So sometimes we need to strengthen things or clarify things. So I think I'm saying that watersheds, both municipal and for individuals, is an issue in Clatsop County that I think needs to be somehow addressed.
What's the issue within Clatsop County?
Spraying would be a real logical one, I think, where.
It's a concern.
Yeah. With concern.
It's a concern, yeah. Unfortunately, because these are really complicated, very complicated issues a lot of the times, it's difficult to communicate the amount of thought that goes into some of these processes and the actual impacts versus the perceived impacts. And sometimes the perceived impacts can be actual impacts. I mean, I definitely know, psychosomatic responses and that sort of thing, which are a real concern to folks, so.
And Hampton is local and here and, has a good reputation and works well with their neighbors. But, I mean, some of the industrial forests at their headquarters are long, long ways away and they don't interact with their neighbors in the same way that Hampton
I think they're
does.
working on that. They're being encouraged to increase that.
Mark Morgan's is very, very involved
Yeah.
in everything. So he's, obviously that's a fairly significant landholder to the forest lands. So he's trying to be like you are proactive on the front end of this, and so it's not like this is happening and he doesn't know about it. They're representing obviously huge interests, and it belongs to CalPERS, I believe. So.
And just to interject, I'm pretty sure every landowner in the state, private industry, they all have their own separate land use policies. And so the state lands, they have a land use policy that they abide by that could be different than more or same as the Forest Practices Act. I think each industry owner has their land use policies. How big of a buffer beyond the Land Use Act should we have? How, do we buffer this stream that doesn't exist right now, but has for 6 months, and it's just dry for now, dry stream bed. I think that when you go and say, well, we need to make this stronger, it says to these landowners that, well, we instinctually think that you're doing something wrong. And so it shuts down that open communication link that I think that that for those that are doing a great job, possibly feel attacked or possibly feel like, well, gee, we need to defend forestry as an entire group. I guess I just hesitate when we're taking the entirety of Clatsop County and saying we need to do this stronger when 90% of Clatsop County is doing a darn good job. I don't know about that other 10%, but man, we're doing a darn good job. And please give credit where credit is due, I guess. We get land-based through the newspaper.
I think her example of the teacher having rules, and that to me is a fair analogy. That
Speaking to another
relates,
teacher, I
so.
understand.
Exactly. So,
And I mean, just to clarify a little bit, we actually don't necessarily have written policies because the landscapes are so unique between space to space that we evaluate each situation individually and make those determinations, which is one of the reasons that kind of broad policies, I think, often get a lot of resistance because they are often ineffective at the goals they're trying to achieve because it's so difficult to set a broad prescription when the landscape and the situations are so unique and varied.
Thanks. High five. I just understand. I understand rules. I give kids rules every day. But if you give them too many rules, and in this situation, if you give foresters too many rules, they're going to end up losing a lot of money. And then there's no wiggle room. There's no communication. They're just all sad because they've lost money.
I think that's the point too, as Jen was making as well, is like everything is so specific and unique. There's little microclimates, there are different, environments and ecosystems, and foresters like that, like have the flexibility to, engage in different ways. And I think for a lot of folks, when we talk about broad policy changes and regulation, we feel like it should be about outcomes, not the practices themselves. And where are the problem areas? Where do we know we need to do better? Let's focus on those. Let's work
That was
together.
what I was thinking, yeah.
Rather than just these broad brush things that may or may not address the problem at hand. It seems like communities and as forest landowners we would be doing more to focus in on priority areas and work better together. But
well, there are a lot of concerns. I could agree with you. but people have, at the forestry meeting that some of us attended to, a lot of people were frustrated because they had a lot of concerns about what's happening, and so there needs to be an acknowledgement of their concerns, and this is kind of part of that process. So I don't think.
What were some of the concerns for those of us that were
I
there?
think with the Forest Practices Act and how people perceive things to be happening, and whether you agree with it or not, there are a lot of people with a lot of concerns, and there's 5 other groups or whatever, so there will be conversations, and those will have to be. Those can't just be. Just say, hey, it's going to hurt my feelings, so maybe let's not do that. That won't work. I think there has to be acknowledged, of people's concerns.
At the county level, we can't change Forest Practices Act, can we?
Well, it's not the Forest Practices Act. I think not. But
Right.
this is a comprehensive plan that affects all land use.
Right, but we
and
can't
public,
supersede
so.
what the state's already mandated.
But this is an extension of the state.
So,
through
but
land use
it's a
planning.
social acknowledgement of people's concerns. Is that basically what this, you're saying is we're acknowledging that you have a concern here. And
Public
that-
outreach is as an aspect of this
Right.
whole thing. So
Right, and
that
it's,
will happen, and a lot of people have a lot of concerns with forest-related issues.
right.
I-
No, I mean, I totally understand. I've witnessed and.
So that information is going to be fed into this process.
And so this sentence structure and everything is saying, yes, we acknowledge that you are concerned and that we are mandating that nothing less than Forest Practices Act is, even though by state law we can't do less than Forest Practices Act.
I can't say,
Okay.
but
I'm
Is
just
there
trying to
an
understand.
intention to vet? I mean, so you're saying, we need to acknowledge these concerns as part of that
I'm
acknowledgement?
just kind of playing the devil's advocate.
Oh, no, and I know.
No,
I'm
I'm just trying to
not trying to,
understand.
I'm actually not
In
trying
my
to argue
opinion.
with you, I'm trying to kind of expand on what you're saying. I'm wondering if we can acknowledge those concerns by investigating. Like, is that the appropriate
Oh, that's an
avenue to take for
Of what?
investigation.
investigating, if I have a concern X, well, okay, so we go and see, does that concern have a strong factual basis? What's the appropriate remediation for that concern?
I like that.
I think Gail and we've taken a lot of information from a whole lot of people, and so we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll get a lot of chances to be part of that process. So, I think as it moves up the food chain, then it'll be easier to scrutinize. Maybe.
I know that California now is having some real problems because they got real specific with their rules and regulations, and it's affecting their, fires especially. They put a 4 foot on a lot of the power lines is all they can trim. Well, you have limbs that are longer that are falling on power lines and starting fires. They've got too specific. So I understand, Cheryl, what you're saying about getting the wordage in there. You just got to be real careful. You don't put too much wordage in.
And I would say,
And then
Yeah, right now we're at,
you're
are
going down the
encouraged.
tunnel.
There's no word.
I read that
There's
article,
nothing.
and I also read things are getting warmer, so they are much drier faster.
Yep. Well, look
And,
at, yeah.
and the big and is there's a bazillion more people living in that area where there used to be
Bazillion more power lines.
It used to be sparsely populated, like in Northern California, for instance. So
Yeah,
to me, the zoning is how do we encourage people to live
In the city,
I have a hard time. I have a hard time to say Northern California disturbs me. Santa Rosa is not Northern California.
And I feel like you really understand because you work and own a dairy, and so you probably face the my you're stinky over there, and how dare you make smells.
We're very fortunate. We have excellent neighbors.
Well, I should cite the Tillamook issues.
Everybody,
Tillamook
Wyoming.
But I think that farmers, they face the same situation. I mean, there's situations where that, they're doing like the ditch situation in the Willamette Valley. And I feel like, I don't know, I understand the need to want to make something more sound more firm and more, because you're listening to the people that are
Or
concerned.
encouraged.
Or encouraged. Yeah, no, I totally
That
understand
doesn't
that.
really mean anything.
It doesn't mean
Doesn't
anything.
mean dick.
I mean, I also agree with, we have a Bonneville right of way through our land, and, they're out there, they're trimming, they're taking care of their piece, making sure that we're not a fire hazard last time I checked. They just suddenly appear in our field, and then I call my neighbor and ask him, why is there stranded men in my field?
You know,
But,
They do always let us know.
On Forest Practices Act, I don't want to get too far off of that and go back to these other questions whenever we the Washington Forest Practices Act, I'm sure you're aware, is different than the Oregon Forest Practices Act. And it's, my understanding, and again, I'm not the expert on this, my understanding is that it provides bigger buffers, more protection for watersheds. And I tried this week to get, I have seen a slide of the Washington Forest Practices Act and the Oregon Forest Practices Act, and I'm trying to find that. I will try and find it by the county meeting in 2 weeks, and I couldn't get it because we would have passed it out. So
Jacob here could answer any questions about the differences between the two
yeah,
states.
I don't want to go
So-
down any rabbit hole.
You
We
may
want to
just
stay on that. I
remember
just
that
want to
you're-
say that there are differences.
Very
There are differences. I think that this is not something I've ever actually come across in literature, is examining not differences in prescriptions of policy, but examining differences in outcomes. So I have never seen an analysis of what those additional buffers in Washington provide, and it may be out there. I personally never come across it. I don't think I've ever come across it in a peer-reviewed setting, for sure.
well, there's not been a peer review of well, here's this 50-foot buffer, but 150 makes it so much better. There's no scientific that I am aware of.
There's studies in place right now by Washington DNR reviewing these things on the Olympic experimental forest, and they are trying varying different prescriptions.
To see where the happy is.
Yeah, to see what, and from my antecedent evidence, I see no difference in the buffers I apply in Washington versus the buffers I apply in Oregon or the forest practices. The results don't change. The only thing that changes is I leave more trees on the ground in Washington than I do in Oregon, but I don't see an increase in water quality, and I don't see those kind of things. And so comparing Washington, the other thing is comparing Washington and Oregon are two different animals. Washington has a lot of different state statutes that it is required to protect that Oregon doesn't, such as the Bolt decision and things like that. And so it's not a apples to oranges comparison. The other thing is the geology is also different. Over here we have a lot different base geology, and it amazes me. We get similar amounts of rain, but the way it influences the ground is completely different than Southwest Washington. So in my mind, it's very difficult to have a broad rule that you're not going to get the results you want everywhere with it.
So outcomes based, I think that's a real practical way of trying to address people's concerns.
I really like that.
If there's no herbicide in the water, then there's not herbicide in the water.
Right.
But if there
I mean,
is,
is that
then
there's
we
the
agree
water
we both
test
have a
shows.
big problem
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
So-
We actually, I think in general, the company completely agrees with that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if herbicide is in the water, that's going into our Napa water source. Because we're well.
What if they're registered for aquatic use, though? A lot of these herbicides are registered for aquatic use.
And that's why I
and
think the water testing is
they're
important.
used out, in some of these lakes on Classic Plains often to battle invasive weeds. So.
Can I go back real quick to Cheryl's point about the number 10, the forest activities, the idea that I don't know how it would fit in, an acknowledgement of watershed councils, because I don't know how those are doing, but
Communication
They're not
with the local
in the
watershed.
past, they were really very positive where you have an intersection of users, and they were very, very productive to me. That would.
Aren't you on the Napa Water Board? Or were you
No,
at some point?
that
Okay,
was-
you, okay.
Pretty much report, but I think the Watershed Council is something that could be acknowledged and encouraged to some degree, as far as Cheryl's concerned about forest landowners and water users. How do you link those two in the Watershed Council?
Well, I think you probably nip a lot of the issues in the bud before the issue is actually presented. If there's more open communication between the watershed and the water.
But that is a vehicle that
Yeah.
would address those problems, I think.
And it didn't exist when
It
this
didn't
plan
exist
was
when it
written.
was
Yeah.
I don't know how much.
Is that still
Involvement.
happening? Because there used to be.
Well, no, the watershed. There's active ones for
Like the
every
Nicolai
watershed county.
Watershed, is
They
that still
actually
going?
Yes.
merged together.
They merged. They're all the North Coast Watershed Association now. And they have like a river district and then a coastal district. They just recently so there's not individual, like there used to be a Skipping on Watershed Council and so those kind of dissolved and now they just have a river, or I forget what they're called exactly.
That makes
but
sense.
it's
The watershed
Okay.
area.
Right.
But
To me, that's-
if you're
Just
from
I think
Necac,
mostly
you know
for
it's
like
gonna be-
logistical reasons,
Yep.
because they like
You're gonna have
too many meetings to go to.
And nobody wants to
But
volunteer.
it's all like, yeah, they just
Well, I
get
think there's
one.
a-
Did they interact with the water districts often?
No, it's
Yeah,
totally
I don't
separate from
think-
the water
yeah.
district.
In,
They have nothing to do
in
with
my
that.
experience, they don't.
No, the
often
Watershed
actually
Association
interact
like
with that
gets
much.
grant money to like
Yeah.
improve culverts and
Yeah, restoration
right,
stuff.
do water
Right.
quality monitoring and that.
So might be a squirrel, but there's so much more that herbicide application that happens in the county other than forestry. You've got farming, I guess I'm just careful of putting a
Say
microscope.
residents.
Yeah,
residential
I mean-
use of
Oh,
chemicals.
yeah.
Oh
They're
yeah,
the worst.
the let's kill everything. No, but I would just be real hesitant to make sure that that the microscope doesn't land primarily on forestry for any herbicide in the water, or like Big Creek. You see the side of the road spraying truck just keep on spraying right over the river, and you always just kind of go, but just to make sure that we don't focus, like drop that microscope just on one entity alone that acknowledges.
Yeah, this week we're on
Or
goal
just on
4,
Right.
so.
Yes.
It is under the microscope.
Well, and I don't think that the purpose of this document is to have any kind of negative consequences for any one industry or anything, but more to just outline like, hey, we value clean water in this county, and everybody in every area, personal, private, public, all of it, we
There's-
all want to work together on this so that we have water to drink, because that's something we all want,
Yeah. No.
But
so
does
I
have
mean,
negative
But
consequences.
there's practical solutions,
Sure,
and it
yeah.
becomes part of the conversation, which
Right.
hopefully, because then the next question is, how do you have clean water?
right.
Of course.
Is this document too, when we talk about documenting concerns, is it also to document what's working really well? Like what are some success stories in forestry in the county? Like, what are we finding is good and worth keeping and expanding upon? That's a question to add.
And we're doing a field trip, the county offered a forestry field trip.
Actually, Morgan's volunteered it.
Okay.
I
It is
just
again.
said sure.
Yeah.
Bad cold.
Glad to see him pulling his weight.
Are you going on that, Cheryl?
Yes.
Great.
And you should talk with him.
Yeah, I talked with Mark over the phone. He volunteered me to be on that tour too. So.
I'm lucky for you, though.
Well, speaking of being restrictive or whatnot, just as a base level, or anyone who's attending that read the policies, is there anything in there that seems like problematic or that isn't going far? Like, is there, because these aren't just like, I'm not saying like, what am I trying to say? Is there something that like, if it's not broke, we're not gonna fix it, right? So like, is there something in here that anyone, like, you
That
were saying,
doesn't
like,
pertain to today that it did 40, 50 years ago.
exactly, or like that you guys have, you know, more knowledge about, or you're like, that looks pretty good, and like, it still seems to be serving well, and that's acting well, you know? That would be something I would be curious to know.
Like you're addressing like the Forest Practices Act. Is
No,
there
there's
something
policies in
No, that's
here.
Oh, okay.
Just like, is it like, oh, that seems pretty good, that seems like it's addressing all the concerns I would have, or like it's putting, you know, this spin on it, as opposed to more talking about it nebulously, you know, it's like,
We could give this to our foresters in the county.
I would
and
love
if
to
they
hear.
email maybe you, they could provide feedback on their experiences with each of these things. And
yeah.
a lot of them have been managing the same land.
'Cause, like,
as
one of
long
the-
as this plan's been in, so.
To
you probably
be honest,
see
one of the
change.
options might just be like, still looks good, check mark on goal 4, you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily something that we have to change. It could be something that we just kind of say that still looks good, you know, so that I'm just curious to hear, like, if there is any concern from, there's something that's not being addressed, or that seems like it's still pretty good from people in the industry.
Do you have any more, Cheryl?
Any more sticky
Oh,
notes?
I was
Two weeks
gonna
before
segue over to her because that was interesting. So from sort of from policy 19 to 23, a lot of that is how to not divide land, how to not take it out of forestry, and I would think that those may be working well, but I think that's a valid question. Y'all would know better than we do whether or not it's working, because the goal is to protect forest lands. That is the goal of, that is, you know,
Or
goal
not
forest
just the lands,
purposes.
but the activities of forestry.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
part of the
it's-
goal,
it's-
is
I
working
mean,
forest.
Its goal is to
Yeah.
conserve forest lands for
Free
forest uses.
Yeah, yeah, so I think Clatsop County's been good at not chipping away at the forest land and getting it subdivided into 4 little things, and then the next year it's 8 little things, and then the next year, you know. But to leave them in, you know, the 80 zones and 38 zones, so that would be good to know, yeah, if indeed it is fulfilling that goal.
Well, I think for us, and Jacob could probably speak to it better, but like I said, we have a mill in the area, so we're very passionate about keeping our forest lands as forest lands.
Well, in any forest lands, because, you know, our forest lands only supply about 20% of the logs we need to run that sawmill. And so we buy logs from everybody and anybody that'll sell them around here. And so it's not just, we don't just want to preserve our lands as forest lands. It benefits us to preserve anything that'll produce a tree as forest lands.
And they're not gonna get chipped off and
I think,
parceled away in
houses,
little
yeah.
pieces.
I think in general the conversion in Clatsop County has been minimal. I mean, it happens, little chips here and there, but it tends to be off of the smaller landowners.
And I think the big show is in the southern, they say South County, there's no such place called South County, but the southern part of Clatsop County where there is, you know, the state has been working at consolidating its holdings further east where there's fewer people, fewer conflicts, which is really smart, I think. But there's both of those things along, you know, the ocean where you have people and conflicts. So that those conversations will be probably far more animated than this one.
Yeah, well, and you know, like a broad, you know, decades-long visioning, I would say that this is purely my opinion, I'm not speaking for anybody but me right now, where the threat of conversion is more a reality is if legal or policy or some other external factor decrease the value of those forest lands as forest lands. You might see non-mill owning forest landowners, such as some of the financial groups that own a lot of land, looking hard at conversion and development as a way to get value out of the lands that they own. You know, no matter how much their employees who live here might be unhappy about it. So if you're looking at a document like this, that would be, in my mind, where the concern for preserving forest land as forest land would actually be for potential external changes that happen that change the value of that
Because
land.
I've argued we need more flexibility because in terms of warranty, where the whole thing is on a floodplain, well, if you don't want people, you know, flood insurance, that's an issue in floodplains. So you don't want people living there, well, then they should live on the hill. But if the hill isn't zoned for residential use and they should be living on a hill to be out of the flood zone,
Yeah.
then to me, I'd like to see more flexibility where we take this out, then maybe we could convert this, you know, we'll have some kind of swap where you're talking about how your watershed can't be managed with rules, you have to analyze it.
Yeah, I think land swaps have they're
It's like the
underused.
seaside school, you know, which is
Right.
they kind of were
That's
short-sighted
donation.
in recognizing the challenges they might face if they did that.
I'd rather see land swaps where they're, instead of eminent domain, they come in and just take it from you.
Right.
Yeah, I would say some kind of flexibility on land use planning so that you can address those situations.
I had another, some of the wording in the policy seems unnecessary too, like number 14 is roads and forest areas shall be limited to the minimum width necessary for traffic management and safety, but the Forest Practices Act covers that in way more detail, so, and the policy already says like, you have to follow the rules of the Forest Practices Act, so I think that some of the,
Redundant.
yeah, some of the redundant things could come out.
I was curious if anybody had any other, like, concerns, like Cheryl, did you have any of the other statements that are in the previous county plan that you see as, you know, something that the verbiage needs to be changed, or something that needs to be just expedited, or
Those were the ones that I was concerned about, so,
just those?
yeah, 1 and 3 and 10, and 10, you know, specifically talked about watersheds, so that protection of watersheds was a concern for me.
And what are the
I
other
want to
goals?
ask
Is
Gail
it
a
water?
question about a lot of these other groups. Are their notes available online?
You're the first group to discuss Goal 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so next week we'll do Southwest, which is Arch Cape area. We will do Clatsop Plains, and then the week after that you've got Elsie Jewel, Seaside Rural, the county-wide one, and then November 26th is Lewis and Clark.
So Southwest would be
Oh, yeah.
pretty eventful.
It will be eventful, I'm sure.
That would be the one to go.
And actually,
Adventures.
I would encourage any of you, if you can show up. They meet in the day. They meet at 10 a.m.
That's
the
really
problem.
kills me.
But I don't know if there's any way to get a representative down there. It's 10 a.m. on the 13th at the Arch Cape Fire
Is it a
Station.
Tuesday or
It's
a
Wednesday.
Thursday?
It's-
Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's really rough when you want industry members present, or to appear to want industry members present, or if you're not retired, you can't show up.
Common
'Cause-
thing with these kind of things.
Yeah.
But then if you're a
Yeah.
volunteer, I feel I have rights too. I
Yeah.
don't want to be here 10
True,
o'clock at night,
true
so.
story.
Each group set their own meeting
Yeah.
time, so that's not
Yeah.
something. But if you have written comments, we would be happy to bring them
So-
to the meeting too.
In regards to this agenda,
Yeah.
are we gonna address anything on it other than the few?
We can maybe at our next month's meeting.
However you want to do it. We throw things out just to start a conversation, and that's all it is. So however the conversation goes,
Is
and
there
wherever
something
the
you would
chair
like
wants
to
to.
address on there?
Well, I just look at it and I say, what policies might reduce threat from wildfire? And I mean, industrial logging and management of the land reduces wildfire. So, I mean, I'm curious as to, you know, why that statement is there, I guess, or
And
what
you know,
fed into it.
in fairness, you know, when we draft these questions, we are not forestry experts, so we may be asking questions that, you know,
You just want
show our
them to-
ignorance, for lack of a better word.
I mean, that you've heard come from the public and others
Yeah.
meetings and things like that.
There's rumor there, well, not rumor, but there's hearsay on how wildfires start and fuels and so on and so forth. And then there's, you know, an industry member actually working in it. And so I'm just curious, I mean, and that was why, that I just used that as an example, was, you know, it's a very open-ended, and then why would we, I mean, are you wanting to put a policy, I guess my question is, are you wanting to put a policy in
This is
place?
just conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't
Well,
know.
And I would say, you know, talking about the Forest Practices Act, you know, supporting that policy would reduce threat from wildfire because there are rules in place in the Forest Practices Act that after forest practices activities, there has to be treatment of slash. And so that's another one of those that is supported by, you know, saying, supporting the Forest Practices Act. We're supporting, you know, reduction in chances or threats of wildfire because there is those rules written into that document.
And that's not our problem.
Okay, well, that's why I was just curious about why it was on the agenda, was because it just seems like it's over here.
I think it was
problem
just questions that were heard at larger public events to this would
That-
spark conversation. And like
Okay.
you could say like, that's not a concern of ours because we know the Forest Service takes care of it.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
you know, it's just kind of like a more of a discussion topic and not something that we
Okay.
felt that we needed to talk about at this meeting.
That was another question I had too, considering there's different regions now, is the task of this particular committee to address, like, for example, northeast Napa area specific?
No.
It's to
just
bring
to-
our perspective to the countywide plan.
Okay.
So it is to represent this area's perspective?
No, our perspective, but it'll be fed into a larger process.
Right, but I mean, for example, we don't really need to address the South County, I mean,
Right.
that's
The
not
water
going to get put
issue.
forward here as a concern of necessarily
No.
this region.
Right.
Right.
Because,
But all those issues will be brought together
To the-
for a county discussion.
But you gotta admit, it would be interesting to go to that meeting.
I think you should.
Interesting.
I highly
I might
encourage
have to
it.
find a substitute teacher.
But there also may be notes from those meetings available online, so that.
That's
But then
that's
you
fun.
lose the adventure.
I'm sure the countywide one will also have some adventure too.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead.
One of the other policy number 7 was talking about wildlife and elk habitat especially, which isn't something, because I'm not a forester, I hadn't really thought about the elk interaction, but there's talks about how like the State Fish and Wildlife Commission shall be officially requested to resolve adverse impacts on forest land resulting from elk browse and how they like provide financial assistance to forest landowners. And I just wonder if that is still a thing that happens. Is that from the 80s? Is that? I figured it would be, but
Elk browse is an issue.
yeah. But do people really? I mean, do whole forests put up elk fences? I mean, like what? No, I don't see a lot of elk fences when I like drive around.
Sometimes we tube seedlings,
Right.
if it's in
So
a
it's
real
more like for
heavily browsed
individual,
area, or do a lot of interplanting if we've had a bad,
Would you like
Sure.
financial
And I mean,
assistance?
how do you fence on Hampton land? I mean,
well, just on plots,
On
that
plots.
on experimental things, but we don't.
Okay.
So in 1979, you know, that was the infancy of modern forestry, you know, where we were a decade into reforestation and things like that, and we were still discovering a lot of things about what happens when you put a young supple tree in the ground
Right.
in, you know, a place that elk likes to hang out. So in the last 40 years, we've developed a lot of different techniques to mitigate against issues that we may have previously had in 1979. An example would be we plant larger seedlings. We plant 1-1 seedlings, which is grown 1 year in the greenhouse and grown 1 year outside. So they're, you know, 1.5 to 2 foot tall. They have really big roots, things like that. So that was likely an issue when we were planting small seedlings, you know, and the perception was we needed 600 seedlings to the acre and we were only having 350 to survive. So that was a different time. So I would say we have issues with elk browse, but it's not something that we're looking for.
Financial assistance.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wonder if this language is like, if this policy is even relevant, or does it? I mean, yeah, if it is needed, or
I would say that is a good one to get rid of.
yeah.
Do you have another one of those?
This is what we want because it's like the
trim
whole
this down.
document is like 1,000 pages long or something, and like
It
other
should
counties
be
have
like
like 100-page
pages,
So we're trying to see like where
Somebody was really not busy at that time when they were writing this.
Well, they
What
put
are
a
you
lot
saying?
of like they put a, especially for like the agriculture one, there's a lot of like findings that aren't the actual like policies that are like taking up
It's just kind of
page
like
number
breaking out
spaces
the-
that don't necessarily
the
need to be
land.
there. That's kind of one of the reasons that we're doing this thing is like, does it need to be this
Big.
tall?
We'll
Because it's
circulate-
really hard to read.
Exactly.
We'll circulate this among foresters in the industry and get you some like, they'll look at that and they'll say, well, that's that.
Right.
That stuff.
Yeah.
We can do that. That would be great.
So I have all your, I know I have your email, but do I have everybody else's emails? Because
Yeah,
I
my
can
personal, but I
send,
didn't have my work email.
okay,
Put it
I'll
on
send
there,
you
too.
this worksheet that they're working off of that has all the policies.
Yeah.
That would be so,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
And you
that'd
can
be
just,
Because we came in here with this agenda and we're like, huh?
That did start a conversation, didn't it?
They got you here. Maybe a little sweaty. No.
Yeah, but I think that would be great because I would love to hear which one of these, you know, what the industry thinks of these policies that are in full, just to as a viewpoint. So.
You know, I just want to throw out there, I know, Cheryl, you'll be at the county one, you know, the kind of formal tour, but if anyone else on the committee can't make that trip and just wants to learn more about forestry related to this process or not, get in touch with me. I'm right here and I will take you out, you know, whenever we find a time that works and answer any questions you have, so.
Yeah,
You're gonna have a
sounds
big
great.
group. Figure that out.
No, I'm good. I will do as many days as I need to.
And it seems like
I'm happy.
since you own land in Oregon and Washington, that it'll be able to show, you know, the comparison between Oregon and Washington and be able to discuss that, you know, sometimes more isn't better, it's just more, if that makes sense.
I would encourage you to do it.
Yeah.
Because this one, like she said, the county did not sponsor this, someone came to her and said, and they can take 12, and I think it filled fast. So there are 5 CACs, and then there's a countywide one, and there are 12 people going on that one. So I think field trips are awesome, you know, to see things 3D if your back property isn't
Jed's
state
always
forestry.
willing to,
Yeah,
he's always willing to do
I'll
that.
go grab a bunch of cards out of my head. Not just for you guys, but if you have other people who are interested, like I'm 100% serious. I will take out,
I'll take you up on
you know,
it.
I'll start doing it once a week.
I know it's down.
Yeah, we wanna get a
It would be very helpful.
You'd be able to justify one then.
I mean, honestly, a mini school bus driver's license isn't that hard.
Your best
I've been
target audience
certified.
is probably the planning commission and the county commission.
Yeah.
They're the ones that will also be reviewing
Everyone's
everything.
kind of commission.
Well, and the
That's
more
what I
that
should
people
say.
actually talk to each other and aren't doing, you know, like these other, you know, hearsay and like you were saying, and there's actually direct communication, like the better. I think that would be great.
So, I'm not politically savvy. I've been investigating and, you know, falling down the political rabbit hole of what the commission is, and then you've got the planning commission, and then you've got the city commission, and then you've got the
This is the county.
okay. So, I mean, we're just like my mind, and then where does the river come in? I'm not sure which commission that one's called, but I guess so. You guys are not. You are just volunteers that are here for.
Public.
Citizen Advisory Committee, and then it goes to the planning commission, and then it goes to the commission.
We're just here to give our like.
So how do I jump on this
Reviewing this.
volunteership?
You don't need another
Just-
volunteer.
Go to the county
Just
website.
come to our
Or just come to
meetings.
our meetings.
No, go
Yeah,
to the
this
county.
is-
Go to the
Yeah,
county.
anybody who shows up as public has as much say in the whole process
As we
as
do.
those
As
that
you
would,
can see.
but we just are supposed to be at all of the meetings.
And we get all the paper.
Yeah, and we get
And if I
huge
want to fall
binder.
asleep tonight, I'll just read
The
this.
county has
They
a
print
website.
us out the paper, but you can get the paper.
They're always- The county's always looking for people to be
I
at
just
these
want the
committees, and
big
they don't
book
know
with
who to
all the
ask.
words so that I
So-
can
Hey,
read
wait a
it.
minute, you guys, I printed, probably made some of this paper. Keep going.
Right.
I was
I know.
going to ask
Gail
in
made
my
that
last.
comment in the beginning that we're keeping them.
Supporting her to Timber.
I did make a note on my list of questions tonight if it's possible to enroll in the paperless background information. Because I would be more inclined to read this if it was on my computer than I got paper copy.
There
We
is the
can make
newest generation right there. No, I'm kidding.
Honestly, I would be happy to just send you the link to the agenda posted on the website, and you can do it that way.
Cool.
I
Yeah,
will make
don't
a note.
ever print out for me again.
So is that big book on the
Thank you.
website?
All of the documents
Yep.
are,
Because I clicked on something that wasn't that large, and I read
Well, it's broken
It's in
into
chunks.
pieces on the website, so like you'll see goal 1, and so
Okay.
that's just
Yeah, there's a lot of pages.
this
there,
one
but
section
the
here,
ratios.
and then there's goal 2, which is a separate tab in the book. So, and they get it 1 month at a time.
Oh, I know. I just want to open the whole thing and start going.
I have a question just about process, and maybe it applies to this, but I've heard a lot that the county doesn't know who to reach out to. And my question is, well, why not? Like, why doesn't the county have better lists? I mean, how can we improve that? Like, what can we be doing to facilitate information, contact info? Does anyone have any ideas on how that can be avoided? Because we saw this, we're like, why don't people that we know about this? And I thought, well, if there's a better way to do this. How do we do it?
And there is a goal. The goal 1 is about citizen involvement, and I think part of it's that limited staff hours and like all that kind of stuff. But then just
How do you get attention
people?
is the
Yeah,
tricky
how do
part.
you get people
And
attention?
so
We talked about mailers, we talked about postcards, like that kind of thing. But it is a little bit difficult.
There's so much noise,
Yeah.
information. So how do you get, and we had somebody come at a meeting and said, well, call me when it's important. Well,
It's all important.
Okay.
I'm not gonna call you.
we'll call you when
We
it's
can't
important.
call
Sorry to waste your time,
35,000
so.
people every time that there's.
That's something that, and maybe other goals could do it too, but as a forest sector goal, I feel like we could get together a really good stakeholder contact list, especially about emergencies. We're talking about things like this. Like, that's something that this county should be aware of, who owns the land, where the assets are, where the gates are, all this kind of stuff. We could be a much better
Who has keys?
communication. And I think maybe, I don't know if this is the right place to talk about that or something, but I feel like there's potential for improvement.
Absolutely.
and
And
that
to kind of counter offer what Judd's offered, I'm happy to come and talk to anybody who wants to listen to me speak and answer questions. So, it helps that, because like I said, I'm pretty new here. I've been in the county itself for 4 years, but with the county for not quite 2. So I don't have those connections, and I don't have the knowledge that people have who have grown up here and lived here all their lives and are 4th and 5th generation. I don't have those connections. So just having you here tonight has already probably opened up 20 doors that I didn't even know existed. So, thank you.
There's definitely things, and in the industry, we tend to be out in the woods a lot. Like, we're not doing
Which is why I can't find you.
There's potential here. I feel
Yeah.
like there's
Talk to
potential.
Mark.
Yeah.
He's got worked out. But yeah, it's hard to get people, and we talked about how do you send postcards to everybody, so people don't listen to the radio, they don't, there's
not on
there's-
Facebook, they're not, you don't
Yeah.
get daily anymore, Well, and, at least having some sort of phone contact, landowner, something or other. That way, if there is information that comes out or questions that need to be asked, you're able to ask those questions rather than, because I don't know there's a problem unless somebody tells me there's a problem. I think that's how a lot of us work. And I think about emergency preparedness, and when that pipeline issue happened, I was in town. And fortunately, I knew who had keys to what gates and who could get me over the pipeline so I could get home.
And there is a hazard school. Goal
See?
7.
See? It's a whole new world here. but to be able to call a landowner and say, oh, so-and-so owns that land, has that key to that gate, we can get it open, and we can get people who are stuck in town.
Right. Well, we've talked about like
Up and
pipeline
over. Yeah, and actually have a map of, pipeline, so you don't get lost.
Yeah. He's so nice. The green.
There they are.
I think we're just about wrapping up. I would like to, I feel like I kind of want to chew on the forestry issue a little bit more, and maybe we could reserve the beginning of our next meeting to talk about it a little bit more.
You can have the whole meeting.
Great. Well,
I would like to
So with
hopefully
that-
get a meeting with the forestry industry to talk about the goals before the next meeting, so that we can
Yes.
have that input before we rehash it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to facilitate that.
Yeah.
I know people, and I think all the landowners here, and I can push them.
Well, that way there's another question about oak routes.
I don't think we do.
No, I told Jerry so.
So, our next meeting is scheduled for December 5th. And I know we've got Thanksgiving coming up. So, do you want me just to send out some dates to you? And Jed, do you want me to send dates out to you to kind of coordinate when we
Yes,
can do this between now and December 5th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And are you guys just goal 4? This is your
No,
only bullet?
all the
Or
goals.
you're all of it?
They're in for
For
the
the next-
3-year period.
Oh, let's not cards.
Well, you can join us. You can join
I don't
us
know.
every month.
We welcome everyone.
So I noticed there's a lot of supporting documents in the original plan. There's like true cash value of forest land and private industrial holdings and stuff like that. Cubic foot site class data. Is that something, if we brought that information, because that's stuff.
Have a date?
Yeah, it's out of date now, or it could be like, public or private industrial holdings, that's out of date. Is that something, if we brought along, that would need to update this, in that index? Or?
One of the things we've also talked about is eliminating some of those detailed things that aren't going to be relevant in 20 years from now, because we want, this is not the document for that kind of information.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
it creates this, I'm on page 12 of 46.
Yeah.
And the document's 6 pages long, and the supporting
yeah.
data is.
We're all on the same page on that.
And on outdated things, somewhere in here, it does say that, that the timber supports schools, and obviously that's outdated because the schools are
What?
funded out of the general fund now with the
Not all of
exception.
them.
Yeah,
Not all of
Jewel. Yeah, Jewel, I know.
Seaside.
Seaside,
Yeah.
the money goes, the state just takes it all and redistributes it. So you could say that tax revenue from timber dollars is supporting education everywhere in Oregon.
Yeah, doesn't it all go to the general fund? I mean, the general,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's measure.
Depends on your formula.
So are we
Yeah,
like
yeah.
tentatively saying yes for December 5th, hoping that there's a meeting that can happen before that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just wanted to look up.
So December
5th, it's a Thursday at 4.
Yeah. So this group
We do
typically
first Thursdays
meets,
at
Oh, that's nice. It's not 10 a.m. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. This was a really nice discussion. It's nice to have so many people
And
at
we
the
love the
meeting.
community involvement.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for the time.
Oh yeah, I have to say an official, we've...
No, I just want to,
okay.
talk very briefly. So we've got our December meeting scheduled, and if we finish goal 4 at that point, then what I am proposing, very nicely, strongly encouraging, is that we take a break until April. I'm going to give you goal 5 tonight. That's just the goal. We're going to feed to you via mail or email additional support documents for goal 5 over the next 4 months, because goal 5 covers a lot of territory. It's open space, water, wetlands, wildlife habitat, fish habitat, open spaces, scenic spaces, historic resources, and about 5 other things that I've forgotten. So this would just get you started. It also gives staff a chance to go back and start rewriting, if needed, policies that are coming out of our discussions with all the groups. And so if everybody be good with that, wrap up in December and then take a break till April.
Great, that sounds great.
Okay, so let me give you your binder. You do have a goal 5 binder. So.
Okay, that's okay.
And
You
that's,
don't know
that's
yet.
also,
You can't just have one giant binder.
goal 5 by itself is 626 pages.
Thank you.
And 90% of it is about mining and quarries. So if you're interested in mining and quarries, be here for goal 5.
So Juana is the one who initiated this process, I'm thinking.
Yeah, right?
Will somebody see Tally? To give
I
her?
will, yeah, I'd be happy to give it. Yeah.
I'll leave you both of those.
Thank you.
What do you think about the setting up there?
When we set it at 33 months, Was this 3-month hiatus figured in there? Or are we now at 36 months?
I would have to go back and look at the schedule. We didn't necessarily schedule a hiatus, but we did schedule some additional time where we thought some goals might take longer. So I think we're still on track.
And staff rewriting goals and stuff is harder.
Yeah. And that we had already kind of factored in ongoing, but we just have not had time.
Yeah, we